18 Chechi Kingdom fights to eliminate 3 monsters. Thief masters and apprentices brave the heavy snow and strong winds, and traveled day and night without fear of hardship. In early spring, they arrived at the border of Chechi Kingdom. Suddenly, they heard a shout, as if there were many people shouting. Tang Seng was afraid, and reined in his horse, and dared not move forward. Wukong said, "Let me go and take a look." After that, he jumped into the air and flew forward on the somersault cloud. It turned out that a Taoist priest was supervising a group of monks to work. Wukong turned into a passing Taoist priest and asked the Taoist priest. Only then did he know that 20 years ago, when Chechi Kingdom was hit by a drought, 3 Taoist immortals, Huli, Yangli and Luli, came to compete with the monks here in their ability to pray for rain. As a result, the Taoist priests won and were named the national master by the king. From then on, they enslaved the monks of the whole country. Wukong asked the monk again, and the monk said the same thing as the Taoist priest, and said that the gods in the sky told them in a dream that they could only be saved when Tang Seng's eldest disciple Sun Wukong came. Sun Wukong was very proud of hearing this. He killed the Taoist priest with a stick, revealing his true appearance. He let most of the monks go, and led 10 monks from the city to see Tang Monk and explain the situation. That night, they stayed in Jiwan Temple in the city. In the middle of the night, Wukong called Bajie and Sha Seng to ride the cloud to the sky above the Sanking Hall, and saw the 3 Taoist priests chanting scriptures. Wukong deliberately teased the Taoist priests and used a magic spell to blow a breath of fairy air, which turned into a gust of wind that blew into the Sanking Hall and blew down the incense, candles and oil lamps. The Taoist priest was so scared that he went back to his room to sleep. Wukong and the other 2 got off the auspicious cloud and came to the main hall. They pushed down the 3 statues on the altar and hid them in the back garden. The 3 of them turned into Yuanshi Tianzun, Taisheng Laojin, and Lingbao Daojin, and ate all the offerings on the table. A young Taoist priest heard the sound and walked into the hall. He ran away in fear. After the 3 monsters, Tiger Power, Sheep Power, and Deer Power, found out, they asked people to light candles and came to the main hall. They didn't see anything strange, so they thought it was 3 gods who came down to earth, so they knelt down and kowtowed, begging the gods to give them some holy water and elixir. Wukong thought it was funny and wanted to tease them further, so he asked them to find something to hold the holy water. The 3 monsters rushed to bring jars, sand bowls, and vases. Wukong used the excuse that outsiders couldn't see the affairs of the gods, so he asked the Taoists to go out and close the door. After a while, he let them in to get the holy water. When the Taoists entered the hall, they saw that there was holy water in the jars, bowls, and bottles. They kowtowed to thank the emperor, and then each of them took a cup of tea and drank it. They smelled a urine smell, and then they realized that they were deceived. The next day, Tang Seng and his disciples came to the palace to exchange the pass. When the 3 monsters saw them coming to the door, they told the king that they had killed the Taoist priests and pretended to be gods. Wukong refused to admit that he did it. It happened that many people were asking the national master to pray for rain in front of the palace gate. The king asked Tang Seng to compete with the national master to see who could pray for rain. Wukong agreed immediately. The Taoist Huli asked Wukong to go to the altar with him. Wukong said, "Then whose credit is it that the rain came?" Huli had to go to the altar alone. Huli was holding a sword with his hair disheveled. He chanted spells and burned paper. After the first token sounded, there was wind in the air. Wukong saw that he had some real skills, so he jumped into the air and asked Feng Po and Zun Erlong, who were blowing the wind, to stop immediately. He also asked Yun Tong, Wu Lang and Lei Gong Dian Mu to rest aside and wait for his order. Huli Daxian was surprised to see that the wind stopped again. He sounded the token for the 4th time and called the 4 Sea Dragon Kings. Wukong quickly told them the situation and asked the 4 Sea Dragon Kings not to rain a drop. After the arrangements were made, Wukong returned to the ground and happened to meet the king, asking Huli why it didn't rain. Huli lied and said that the Dragon King was not at home. Wukong said, "Let me take care of it." Wukong accompanied Tang Seng to the altar and asked Tang Seng to just sit and meditate. He shook the golden hoop stick according to the signal agreed in advance. Immediately, a strong wind blew, dark clouds filled the sky, lightning and thunder roared, and heavy rain poured down. It rained for 3 hours. The people cheered loudly, and the king nodded repeatedly, smiling, and said, "Enough, enough, it will be redundant if it rains more." Wukong listened and pointed the golden hoop stick to the sky. Suddenly, the dark clouds dispersed and the sky cleared up again. The king was very happy and immediately exchanged the pass for Tang Seng. Huli Daxian was not convinced and wanted to compete with Tang Seng in meditation. Tang Seng was the best at meditation, so he immediately agreed. In front of the palace, 2 meditation platforms were set up with 50 tables on each side. The Tiger Power Immortal rode a cloud to the western platform and sat down. Wukong transformed into a fake body and stood in front of the hall. He rode a cloud to carry his master to the eastern platform. The meditation time was set at 4 hours. The Deer Power Immortal pulled out a short hair and turned it into a stink bug, which bounced onto Tang Seng's head, biting him so hard that he felt pain and itchiness, and was very uncomfortable. When Wukong saw that something was wrong with his master, he turned into a bird and flew over Tang Seng's head. Knowing that it was a monster, he bit the stink bug to death and then flew to the western platform and turned into a 7-inch long poisonous centipede, biting Tiger Power Immortal's nose fiercely. Tiger Power fainted immediately, his body tilted, and he fell off the high platform. Although Tiger Power Immortal did not die from the fall, he was also bruised and swollen, and was sent to the palace to recuperate. Deer Power Immortal wanted to avenge his brother, and asked to compete with Tang Seng in guessing things through a wooden board. The king listened to him, and had a red lacquer cabinet carried to the palace. He ordered the queen to put a treasure in it, and then carried it to the front of the hall for Luli Daxian and Tang Seng to guess. Wukong turned into a small insect and got into the cabinet. He saw a set of palace clothes in the cabinet. Wukong tore the palace clothes into pieces and turned them into a cassock. Then he got out of the cabinet and told Tang Seng secretly. The result of the game was, of course, that Tang Seng won. But the king was not convinced. He personally put a big peach in the cabinet and asked Luli Daxian and Tang Seng to guess again. Wukong got into the cabinet again, ate the peach, and put the peach pit on the plate. The result of the guess surprised the king very much, thinking that there was a god secretly helping. Luli Daxian was not convinced, so he pushed the cabinet to the back hall and hid a Taoist boy in it. Wukong got into the cabinet again, turned into Luli Daxian, lied to the Taoist boy that he wanted to win the monk, and shaved the Taoist boy's hair. Wukong changed the Taoist uniform into a monk's uniform, plucked a hair and turned it into a wooden fish, and asked him to hold it. The result of the competition made the monster lose face. Huli Daxian was very unconvinced and wanted to compete with Wukong in beheading, laparotomy and frying. Wukong was skilled and brave, so he would rather be tied up and take the knife first. The executioner chopped off Wukong's head with a knife and kicked it 4 or 5 feet away. Wukong shouted head here in his stomach. The Luli Daxian immediately chanted a spell and asked the land god to hold Wukong's head. Wukong was anxious and broke the rope, shouted grow, and with a whoosh, another head grew out of his stomach. It was time to chop off Huli Daxian's head. After the executioner chopped off his head, he just kicked it more than 10 feet away. Wukong plucked a hair and turned into a yellow dog, picked up the head, ran to the river and threw it into the water. The Tiger Power Immortal shouted 3 times, but no one came. He screamed, and blood spurted out of his neck, and he died. Everyone looked and saw that it was a tiger. The king was shocked when he found out. The Deer Power Immortal endured the grief and wanted to compete with Sun Wukong in laparotomy. Wukong was not afraid at all. He stood in front of the pillar and watched the executioner cut open his stomach. Then he used magic and shouted close. His stomach became exactly the same as before, without even a knife mark. When the Deer Power Immortal's stomach was cut open, Wukong pulled out a hair and turned into an eagle, flying down, stretching out his iron beak, biting the 5 internal organs of the Deer Power Immortal, and spread his wings to fly high. The Deer Power Immortal immediately lost his life and revealed his true form, which turned out to be a white-haired horned deer. All the civil and military officials were so shocked that their mouths opened wide. The Sheep Power Immortal wanted to compete with Wukong in oil pans. Without saying a word, Wukong jumped into the boiling oil pan, somersaulted, and stood upside down as if he was in the water, which made Zhu Bajie laugh. He danced and cheered. Wukong wanted to tease Bajie, so he turned into a nail and sank to the bottom of the pan. Everyone thought that Sun Wukong was dead. The king ordered people to tie up Tang Seng, Bajie, and Sha Seng and throw them into the oil pan. Bajie was anxious and cursed the dead monkeys for getting him into trouble. Wukong heard it clearly and suddenly jumped out of the oil pan. The executioner was afraid of committing the crime of deceiving the king, so he said that it was a soul that appeared. And Wukong was so angry that he beat him into a meat paste with a stick. The immortal Yang Li was really capable. He actually called a cold dragon to protect him. Although there was a raging fire under the pot, the oil in the pot was cold. Wukong quickly jumped into the air and asked the North Sea Dragon King to take away the cold dragon at the bottom of the pot. The immortal Yangli immediately fell into the oil pan, revealing his true form. Everyone saw that he was an antelope. When the king found out, he cried like a tearful man. Wukong advised him, "What's there to be sad about? They are monsters who want to occupy your country." The king stopped crying, prepared a vegetarian banquet to thank Tang Monk and his disciples, and released the monks who were doing hard labor. The next day, Tang Monk and his disciples said goodbye to the king and continued their journey to the west. Alright, this part of the story ends here.
Want to know what happened next? Let's listen to the breakdown next time.